All right, here is the final video lecture for today. Wrapping up on the last two important relationships within adulthood. And so family relationships continue to be important. They still do have influence on people's behavior, but at this point in adulthood, individuals have or are attempting to individuate themselves from their family of origin. Not separating or abandoning them, but forming their own identity outside of them. If they have children of their own or enter into a long-term relationship, they're going to start establishing their own norms, their own traditions. Thinking around Christmas, they might not come over. Things might look differently. And that's all normal part of the transitions within families during this stage. You're going to see entering and leaving of family members. And so at the beginning of the stages, people in early adulthood might be leaving their parents' homes to establish their own families or just their own independence. And so as you go into more of the middle adulthood, there's the empty nester syndrome. So thinking not of just the children leaving the home, but the parents who are experiencing their children leaving the home as well. That's a big change in roles and mindset. Hi, buddy. And oftentimes during this stage, they'll also, parents might pass away, and so children may enter into the caretaker role before that happens. And so kind of that switching between who the caregiver is and who's the recipient of the caregiving. But then also parents leaving and that kind of changing the makeup of the family. Middle adulthood really highlights the different transition roles. Like I mentioned, kind of that empty nesting where children are leaving the home at the same time. Parents might be, those in the middle adulthood might be taking care of their elderly parents, or their elderly parents might be passing away. There's also people after their children have left the home, it changes the dynamics of the romantic relationships and the intimate relationships, and people might have a divorce because with children no longer there to distract them or to be the primary focus, the health of the intimate relationships are poor, and individuals will choose to end them. The final important relationship with adulthood is the relationship with work. We did talk about that in previous videos. But just a little bit more in depth on that. For young adults, the successful entry into workforce is often seen as the marker of adulthood. So especially with individuals who went to college for a specific degree or major, getting a job in their field of degree is seen as successfully entering. Now, for some, that isn't always the case. Job market might be poor. The pressure of choosing a life career at the age of 18 might have been too much, and they chose something that they weren't truly intent on spending the rest of their life working in. Individuals might end up getting married out at the end of college and having children right away and not choosing to join into the workforce until later. So it's not the end-all be-all. It can look different for different people and how they want to interpret it. But as a society, that is often seen as a marker of adulthood. We talked about how the role of work can look different for different people. In a middle adulthood, it really is the source of income. We kind of went through all of those on a previous slide, so I'm not 100% sure why I added them here again. So I am not going to go into depth on that. But it is a huge component of an adult's life is work. If you do not have the ability to work and you're not in a situation where you have a relationship of somebody else being able to provide financially, that can make things difficult. The cost of living is very high. Individuals who can't work are often placed on Social Security disability, which is not a very high amount to kind of meet some of the cost of living needs. There's a piece then if someone does qualify for disability, but they still have the desire to work in some capacity. They're just not able to work full time. They are able to do that, but there's a lot of limits on how much income you can generate based on all the qualifications you have to meet to receive disability income. And so sometimes there's that tension, and I've worked with lots of individuals in a case management capacity where they have a diagnosed disability, whether it be mental or physical. They receive disability, but they still like the purposeful, like that sense of purpose that gets drawn from work. Yet they're very limited in what work they can do, because if they make too much money through an earned income, it will impact their disability. But the earned income still isn't enough to live off of. So it's this tension of like encouraging purpose and fulfillment, at the same time kind of navigating the system to get basic needs met. It can get really messy. And can often be discouraging because you see both sides of the coin, and you don't want to encourage your clients to not pursue something they want, but then having that realistic side of like, well, if you do this, it's going to impact your income. So do you really want to do something that brings you fulfillment, or do you want your basic needs met? That's one of the things I hated so much in case management, because it just felt very unfair to the clients who truly needed it, but truly had a desire to work. There can be the tension, kind of tying back to the last video when we were talking about kind of being a parent, but also being a work, and sometimes feeling like you have one foot in your like work and one foot at home, and trying to balance the tension that becomes with that, like which is your primary identity? Is it both? Is it one, or is it the other? And then how do you kind of navigate the demands of both roles? I mean, again, today's a perfect example. How do you navigate taking care of your kid versus, and also taking care of your obligation at work that I have to all of you? Technology is wonderful because it allows me to do both. But it definitely creates a lot of tension. And the moment I realized Easton had a fever at about 4 a.m, I was up trying to figure out who could watch him, who couldn't watch him, what was I going to do, how was I going to lesson plan, because as I was trying to soothe him back to sleep. So there can be tension with these different relationships in adulthood. And sometimes it requires a lot of support from spouse, from others, from therapists, to try to navigate both the mental and physical toll it can take. So this is the point in class 2 that I would ask, what are other relationships besides the aforementioned that are present in adulthood? I'm going to actually post that as a question on the Sakai page for you to follow up on, as well as another. Just to kind of wrap this up a little bit, why is knowing about the stage important for social work practice? So when appropriate, you have the opportunity to help young adults master the tasks involved in developing intimate relationships. So this is often found in therapy sessions, kind of looking at the attachment, social skills, how do you interact? I think about how many adolescents, their experience with intimate relationships is behind a screen. So how do you actually talk to a person in real life? How do you have the social etiquette in emails and professionalism? And so often social workers can kind of step in that role and kind of work with individuals who might be having a difficult time engaging in healthy, intimate relationships. You also recognize that emerging social roles in early adulthood might differ than those in later adulthood. So just knowing that the huge span of adulthood and how things can look different at the beginning and at the end. And then be familiar with the unique pathways your clients may have taken to a middle adulthood. So whether that be through college, through working, through being married early and divorcing, or being married early, having kids at an early age, and then after they're done having kids, now their friends are just having kids. How do you interact with people then if you're at a different stage in adulthood? And then also understanding the biological and psychological changes that occur during this vast lifespan. And that really ties back into last week's online class. All right, so this is where I had sent an email out earlier today asking if everybody had access to Netflix. I have not heard a no, so I'm going to go ahead and assume that everybody does have access to it. And so what I will need you all to do is to watch the show New Girl. And so it's from season 1, episode 2. It's called Kryptonite. And so Those who are not familiar with New Girl, this is a show that follows like 4 individuals who are in their like young adulthood. Probably my guess would be in their late 20s, early 30s. And so watching that and then answering the reflection questions that are attached. So you're going to be observing the relationships, how they're portrayed in the show, the different types of intimacy that we discussed, how are they shown in the episode, and then also how might adults or even adolescents transitioning into adulthood be influenced by the portrayal of adults in the show. So that is kind of the wrap-up activity to kind of tie in everything that we talked about into something tangible. It's kind of the application piece versus just hearing me talk about it piece. So if there's any concerns about the being able to access the show, please shoot me an email sooner rather than later, and we can problem solve around other options. But it is on Netflix. It's season 1, episode 2, and it is called Kryptonite. So hopefully this was helpful. Feel free to incorporate any of this into your case studies. And that it will be a hopefully helpful lecture that you watched today. Thank you for being flexible and for allowing this little nugget to cough and fart and cry and do all fun baby stuff during this lecture.